empowering your children starts at home. Let's just think about that. Today, our teens are bombarded. They're just bombarded constantly with messages that they're not good enough, that they're broken. They see all these distorted images of what success and happiness is supposed to be. And these images create these negative cycles. And this reinforces the fear that they have to change, that they have to be different if they're going to be approved or accepted or loved. And every parent on the planet wants what's best for their children. And to connect, we have to learn how to address connection blockers. And we're going to hear a lot about that today. We have to understand their struggles, offer them support. We have to protect them as much as possible. However, in the world today, as chaotic as it is, even the most well-intended parents add stress to their children by sending signals that they must meet in order to be accepted or validated. My guest is Emer O'Donnell, and she's the author of the book, Understanding Teen Stress and Anxiety, The Parent's Guide to Building Love and Connection. If you do not have this book, go get it. I read it. It is tremendous. Parents, grandparents, teachers, it doesn't matter. Now, she spent 20 years with global organizations focusing on enhancing well-being and performance. Now, her aha moment was 2016. She recognized the gap in young people's education and founded an organization aimed at proactive well-being education to address the rising stem of teen suicide. Emer, welcome to Life Altering Events.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
We spoke a few weeks ago in getting ready to do this show, and you were telling me all these stops you had along the way in your life, the ups and downs, the bumps. Tell the viewers something about that.
Okay. Oh, my goodness. If I was to boil it down to one thing about the bumps, it's always been about the quality of relationships and the decisions I've made around those. So I was brought up by my mom. She raised three of us. My dad wasn't around. And I think the one thing, even though my mother was incredibly strong and, we had lots of love, maybe not a lot of stuff, but lots of love in our lives, I really didn't know what a good relationship looked like in a home because I had nobody to show it to me. So I would think I was quite naive, very trusting. And when I went out into the world myself, it was a bit of a minefield. Now, I eventually found someone that I fell madly and truly and deeply in love with, but they broke my heart. And the impact of that was enormous. It made me believe I couldn't trust that I could have what I want.
Mm-hmm.
It made me think that maybe this is love and that'll be good enough. And the consequences of that unraveled as I was in a marriage that I thought was okay. It actually wasn't fulfilling what I needed. And I'm sure it wasn't fulfilling what my husband needed. And if you don't know who you are and you don't get to learn that when you're young, and then you can't articulate what you need when you do figure it out, disaster usually happens. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I left a marriage with my very small child, about 1.5 years old. I ended up working for a race team. It wasn't long after I got there, they went bankrupt. I was like, holy moly, what do I do now? And I'd left a job I loved, but I knew that wouldn't sustain the way I wanted to raise my son. I knew it's really important to be there for them. And I learned so much through that process, learned about stress, learned about anxiety, how to feel it and know how debilitating it is. But also watching the racing drivers and seeing how they navigated this setback was quite transformational. They have winning mindsets. They know where they're going. They only focus on their next race and they have fun along the way. And they tend to look after themselves. And I thought to myself, I need more of that. Mm-hmm. And so that was a huge aha moment for me. And it's something that I've tried to bring alongside with me ever since, as well as knowing if you have a real intention of what it is that you want. And for me, it was being able to balance work with my son rather than worrying about where the next penny was coming from. And you can really understand who you are and what you can bring to the table. You can pretty much negotiate anything. And I was able to work from home over 20 years ago when nobody was doing it. So that's what I learned.
Wow. It's amazing that things like working with race car drivers would open up your mind to that. So there's examples everywhere. And it's sort of like the universe is constantly sending us messages, but we got to be watching and listening.
Yeah,
That's
and we have to
incredible.
want change, right?
Exactly. There's nothing changes until we choose to change. And
Okay.
you point that out very well. So tell us, 2016, we talk about this was this epiphany. What happened?
Well, I obviously moved on from that marriage. I wanted more children many years later, and decided I would go and do a master's at Henley Business School in behavioral change coaching. And I found that whole journey transformational. I'd done psychology, I'd worked in business for 20 years, but I never learned anything so powerful as this. The thing about coaching, if it's done well, you can find doors to open that you didn't even know existed.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came out of the end of that process, I also thought it's not rocket science. Why are we only giving it to senior business leaders and elite sports stars? Why wouldn't you give it to a teenager? Because goodness me, if I'd been given that, think of the pain I could have avoided. And it's at the one time during our development when we really need to know who we are. And they're at a disadvantage because their brains aren't fully operational, because they're not fully mature. So giving them tools and techniques, which coaching can do, to empower them, because so many of them don't feel empowered, and to feel that they have worth and value, and so that they can see themselves in the unique, wonderful beings that they are, to me, is a no-brainer in terms of trying to stem the huge, stress, depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide that Gen Z have, because they have more of that than any other generation we have records on.
That's absolutely true. We see, what role do you see social media playing a big role in this self-image or lack of self-image, and how to react to? How do you tell them? How do you react to this,
I
or
don't
how do
think
you
it's any
respond?
one thing. I don't think it's a
Hmm.
huge, I think social media is a huge part. When I think about when I grew up, the only people I had to compare myself for were those in my immediate vicinity. I was
Correct.
not comparing myself with the illusion of the world. And I also
Exactly.
saw those people in my immediate vicinity for real. I also learned very slowly about how to interact with people, how to engage with them in a kind of, so you could get a sense of who they might be. And I think so many young people don't get that now because they're not hanging out with their friends for real nearly enough as they should be. And of course, COVID is going to have a massive impact on that social development. So it's a
Okay.
combination of factors. And I'll talk about feedback in a minute, but I
Sure.
think that's another huge factor. They're constantly being bombarded, being told what to do.
I've interviewed a number of educators, and at the college level, at the high school, at the elementary level, and the message that I'm hearing from every single one of them is socially, our children are so far behind. They didn't get the ones at high school. They didn't get a prom. They didn't get a graduation. And I said, okay, I can understand that. But when you talk like the second grade teacher, and they said, now I'm teaching social and emotional learning more than I'm teaching education. How important is that?
Hugely important, because I always bring it back to your ability to know who you are, your ability to express yourself as you grow up, your ability to be able to read the room. I mean, deep down in our souls, we need to know who we are, and we want to know who other people are to see if we can
Right.
trust them. And if you don't have the skills to do that and navigate, and you're scared to show up, and you're happy to hide behind the device, where often communication can be so distorted, for me, that is a really scary situation, that we start to retreat into our caves rather than expanding in order to embrace all the amazing diversity and people that are around us. We start looking at everyone as if there's someone who's going to kill us. And of course, media feeds that. Oh my goodness, 24/7. You look at your news feed on your phone, there's a murder, there's a rape, there's a war, There's so much stuff, and if I can find a good story, super hard. And I always use the example when Queen Elizabeth died here in the UK, because during that period they talked about her life in such a positive way. You didn't get all the bad news, and it actually brought people together. Because I think there's more goodness than there's bad.
I agree. I've heard many times that there's more that unites us than separates us. But people being people, they want the inside dirty little secret. And the dirty little secret is not a good story, right? The dirty little secret is a scandal.
Yeah, but people buy that scandal much more
Yeah,
than they'll buy the good ones. And you'll ask any newspaper editor, if you put a saucy story on the front of the paper, then people will buy it. If it's a really good feel-good factor, they may not necessarily, because
exactly.
we're tuned in to look for that stuff, and we're tuned into fear and what might hurt us because we need to survive. But the problem now is because we're so digitally connected, something can happen in America and we can feel like it's next door. So
That's right.
the reality gets distorted.
That's absolutely the case. You had in your book something I loved. I was reading it and it said, called it the Marilyn Monroe effect. Explain that. What does that mean?
Well, I think for so many young people, they all look grown up on the outside, but actually they're not in the inside. And I think that epitomized Marilyn Monroe in some way. You know, she was glamorous, she was beautiful, she was able to smile, light up the room. Men and women around the globe loved her. But the truth is, when she was off camera, she was like a vulnerable child. She didn't truly believe in herself, and she had a difficult upbringing. And for me, because she always feared of letting people down, which so many young people do, they fear that with their parents and those people they love. And sometimes they got to make mistakes. It's part of the journey. But they now have captured the ability to smile for the camera in that moment. Everything's perfect on social media. I mean, if we were to look at social media and take that as real, we wouldn't have a problem in the world. But it's not the case. And the pressure to be perfect, the pressure to show up and to have that Marilyn Monroe effect is sadly one of the really difficult things for young people to navigate, because they can't show up as themselves. And when we can show up as our authentic selves, well, that's when we really shine. And unfortunately, as we know with Marilyn, worried about, not being able to really deliver love for people, made her choose all those people that were never going to deliver love for her.
That's such a great point. Is when you have a low self-esteem or lack of trust in yourself, then you feel you don't deserve something better. And this is the best I can get. And so I just better latch on to this. And it tends to be toxic.
Absolutely, because we're trying to fill a void. And of course, we come complete, but we get damaged along the way that puts all those little bullet holes in us, basically. And we have to kind of learn how to heal them to find the perfect, or not a perfect, but the healthy relationships that I think we all need.
Absolutely. I think I love that section in the book that she could turn it on instantly and watch me become Marilyn. I think as a statement you used, and then she'd turn it on. But then there's this misery behind the scene. I think Princess Diana, I spent a lot of time in London in my tech life when she was first married, and you could see that, just look at her. And you could see the big smile for the cameras, and then in her eyes there was this pain, and it's very apparent if you're looking, correct?
Absolutely. I think the eyes always give it away. And I also think the thing about Diana, if you use her as an example, she'd been through a lot of pain, so she could relate to other people's pain, and she didn't want to let people down either.
Right.
Didn't want to burden them with her pain. And I think that's that vulnerability, that ability to connect is what made her so powerful. And people could feel that because she understood them. And I think in a lot of ways, our children just have to learn it's okay that we need help. The human journey doesn't go on like it does on Facebook or on social media or on TikTok. It's got ups and downs, and if you don't realize that truth, you're going to really struggle.
Yes, you are. Now tell us about Team Connect and the 7Q coaching formula that you developed, because I was intrigued reading it.
Okie dokies. So Teen Reconnect is a company I formed, and it's a coaching and training company. I work with parents who want me to empower their kids to be able to navigate this crazy world we live in, because we all need new skills now to be able to do it, because our minds and bodies are not programmed to deal with constant stressors. I also work with young professionals who work with young people who want to update their skills, and with companies who want to have a better result, basically. So for me, on my own journey of coaching and training, I came across what I thought was what young people need, which is the 7Q formula. And that's very much about helping them manage the general data overload by being able to calm everything down, helping them to switch off, because when we're not calm, we don't make good decisions, because calm mind is a superpower. We don't live in an environment that absolutely feeds that. And it's about them knowing who they are. Because when we know who we are, we can figure out what we like, we can figure out how to get more of it, and we can get in the car and we have a roadmap, rather than sat in the car and not being able to make any decisions and feeling overwhelmed. Because I know so many young people feel like they're being left behind. They can't, when we don't make decisions, we feel stuck. Sometimes any decision is better than no decision, but the fear of failure is huge for them. So if they can understand who they are, they get to play to their strengths, and they get to create their well-being through that. If they get to recognize what their gaps are, because that's where our stressors reside, and we can bring that to the fore. If they can really start to develop that positive relationship with themselves, and also to build quality, lasting relationships with others. I know from my experience, and I know some of your story, Frank, when we have quality relationships in our lives, it makes all the difference. Part of that program is the Q Pathfinder. When I came out of Henley, I spent about 4 years of my life developing a tool that enables a young person to get a foundation map of how they like to think and do things, manage emotions, relate to others, and really what makes them tick in the world. Because I think they need that now. Let's bring you back to ground. Let's bring you back, ground you, and bring you back to basics. And it also focuses on 6 key areas that through my research, young people said they wanted help with. About me. Tell me about me. Let me understand myself. How can I fulfill my potential? How can I develop more confidence? Because we know it goes up and down. And there are drivers within us that if we understand what they are, we know what we need, so we can go and get more of that. What are my stressors and how do I manage them? Again, how we're predisposed means we'll be more stressed by certain things than others. If you have that roadmap, hey ho, you can see the red flag when it's coming over the hill. Also about careers. Where kind of do I fit in the world? So give me a sense so I can get rid of that overwhelm of options of 20,000 jobs in the world that I can't even get my head around. Then help me with my learning, because that's a huge pressure, right?
Right.
And then the last one is people, because they didn't like relationships. It had all sorts of connotations. Help me have better people skills. How do I have difficult conversation? And if you know what's called your bad day behavior, which is how we show up, all of us, on a bad day, how it impacts you, how it impacts others, again, that gives you the power to choose something different. And so the Q measure is all of that.
One thing you talked about in the book is teens suffer from feedback burnout.
Sure do.
Expand on that. That was interesting.
Okay. So feedback after breathing is our second greatest human need.
Wow.
Mm. We do it on average every 3 hours. Have you ever been trained how to give feedback?
No.
Yeah, so most of us are lousy at it. Actually, with feedback, it says way more about the giver than it does the receiver because it shows what's important to them.
Yes.
And right now, teens don't get to run free or play much play on their own much anymore outside in the way that you and I would have. And so they're hanging out with the adults much more too. And I don't know about you, but as a parent, if I have a child under my nose and I see them doing something that I think isn't right, or maybe different to how I would do it, it's really hard not to open your mouth and say something.
Yes.
And I've had to learn not to. And the impact is kids kind of learned helplessness. And that drives parents mad because they've even got more to do. So the kids go, hey ho, I'm not going to do that because you're just going to criticize me anyway. So I'm just going to back out and let you get on with it. They also, because they get so much feedback, the shutters come down. And it's one thing that employers really, really complain about with young people at the moment, because it's just gone, I can't cope with any more of it. You're just having another go at me. And we know because of their brains, they're super sensitive to criticism. And it feels like, why bother? The other thing that has an impact is that if kids constantly feel that they're going to be in the firing line from negative feedback, it's like they're walking on eggshells. And it's like the adults, I heard this expression the other day and I love it, are snapping at innocence.
That's good. Snapping at innocence. That's amazing. If
Mm.
if a child or whomever it is you're dealing with isn't capable of understanding, you have to, and you're trying to take your level and put it upon them, and they can't. And then they're obstinate, or they're being difficult, or they're not trying hard enough. Then it just you can watch it in children and little. And I sponsored a lot of youth sports, and you could see the children who are not getting positive reinforcement or not being allowed to be a child.
Mm-hmm.
And they would swing at a pitch in a baseball game and swing and miss, and they get upset and look immediately to their parents and look downcast and depressed. You got to stop that. That's got to stop.
Absolutely, because I say we all come into the world. If we're lucky, we find our purpose, but we're all uniquely unique. And I'm afraid adults, you've got your own life to manage, but you're there to support your kids through this transition, which I think is one of the most difficult for them as teens. But you're not there to create someone they're not, to fulfill what's missing in you, or to fulfill what society deems to be right, because you will corrode their soul. Your job is to help them find their talents. Your job is to help them see themselves and feel able to show up as themselves. And your job is to teach about love and kindness. Because if you do that, they'll love you forever.
Mm-hmm. It's so important. I've seen situations where you'll see a parent say, I'm living vicariously through my child. I wanted to have this kind of a thing. I know I did that. And I never had the opportunity. So I'm going to make sure I give them the opportunity. Then I'm going to get offended when they don't embrace it.
Mm-mm.
Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. I do. How many people have been doctors and lawyers and they never wanted to? And if they're lucky, halfway through, 10 or 20 years into their career, they try to do something that they actually wanted to do.
Yes. I give a talk on that. So many people are living a life you were told to live
Mm-hmm.
rather than a life that you wanted to live. And a lot of that comes back down to fear, correct?
I always say fearful adults fix, they don't connect.
Ah, Another great line. You got all kinds of stuff. Calm mind, snapping at innocence, corrode their soul. This this is very good stuff. Now, Amir, when we spoke, you said you've expanded your program
Mhm.
more for parents now. You initially was with children to understand these connection blockers you've been touching about and become a lighthouse. Explain the lighthouse factor.
Okay, for me, it's what I call the good adult, and it's firmly based in science and research. And what we know is if a young person growing up has a good adult in their lives, someone they feel they can trust, someone they feel they can talk to, someone they can talk their problems through with, feeling secure, not getting their head bitten off, it has a transformational impact. We know it reduces depression, we know it reduces self-harm, and we know that it means that they're less likely to commit suicide. So as the lighthouse parent, it's the opposite to the helicopter one, which we all know about, hanging over
Yes.
you, mothering you to death. But the lighthouse parent is someone that they can call at their lowest. So in the way that a sailor will be helped if they wreck their boat, crash up in the sea, they can look for the lighthouse to guide them in, to help them out, figure out what they're going to do next and send them back out. That is what a lighthouse parent is about, and I call that the good adult. And it's needed because it's the strongest predictor of good mental health for young people. And the absence of it, really harmful.
I saw a statement that said, be the parent or be the adult where your children run to you during hard times and not run away from you for fear of how you will react. And it's all about showing an open straight. It's an unconditional love, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we're not perfect, and we're going to fall on our face as parents, teachers, and educators. We are, but it's a consistency level. Is that right? You talk about that a lot. The consistency of how you're acting.
I think if adults can be responsible for their own behavior and can show up in the way that they should show up, then we can ask that of our children. Why don't kids connect? Well, they don't because they don't want to upset you or add more pressure. They might feel that they're not matching your expectations. They don't want to be judged. I don't want to be judged, and I'm sure you don't either. They don't want to be punished or controlled or have you make a fuss. Maybe they don't understand what's going on, so they're struggling to articulate it. They may believe you haven't got the time to listen to them. How many parents are as addicted to their iPhones now as their children?
Yes.
They can feel vulnerable, guilty, and powerless. And when you're in that state, it's really hard to kind of ask for help. They can often think you're so out of touch with their world, you won't get it. And they just can sometimes feel you won't understand. And if you, every time you're on their case, if you're, the only time they hear from you is when you got something to criticize.
Negative to say, right?
Then actually they're not going to come running to you. And I've asked kids this that I've coached. I said, if you had a parent where they've had two parents, and I said, well, tell me about X parent, tell me about Y parent. How are they when things go wrong? And it's the calmer one, the one that will sit with them, will go through what they've been through, help them not be rabbits in the headlights and be able to find that there is another way of looking at this and another way of dealing with it and going through that scenario so they have that embedded in their memory, rather than the parent, as soon as something goes wrong, what I call the anger goes up. I say to them, who would you call if you're really, really struggling? They go, it's the calm one, because it's what you do all the rest of the year that makes the difference when they're really, really in trouble. And don't make assumptions about your children that their behavior is driven by X. I have so many stories, and I put a lot of them in the book, about young people, how parents perceived X, but actually what was really going on was something different. And because they weren't able to develop that dialogue, or they didn't feel that their children were smart enough, or they didn't feel they were able to be empowered or be given the autonomy, then it all goes haywire.
Yeah, it does. It's another thing I hear a great deal is, and you address this in your book also, is what was good enough for me when I was growing up. You cannot be the parent your parent was, correct?
No,
Different
because we're
world.
all different and we all bring our own baggage. I think if parents can even recognize we all have baggage and they can start to become aware of it and not want to give that to their children, that's a huge start. I think parents can understand that we all make mistakes and we can learn to say sorry in the right way. Then we teach that to our children. Our children watch us and they learn from us. And also be aware that your beliefs that have served you as they're trying to leave the nest, they need to form their own. I'm not saying that they can run wild.
Right.
I'm not saying that you don't put boundaries. But what I do say is, if you've got a really good boss at work and you screw up, or you need to talk something through, think about how they deal with you as opposed to the bad boss who's shouting and screaming at you all the time, or ignoring you, or just, comparing you with the kid next door. No one wants that. It's about being curious as to why they're behaving the way they are, rather than just judging it.
How do you get them? How do you suggest you get the child to open up, to talk about what it is? Because sometimes there's just this intense embarrassment that
For
I'm
me,
not.
I think, sorry to interrupt.
Go no, go ahead, go ahead.
I think for me, it's about them knowing how you behave with the little things. It's about connection. It's about not making it about you. As they're leaving the nest, you might feel so many parents kind of grieve for the child that was there before.
Yes.
And I'm like, they're not coming back. And the whole point is they're not supposed to come back because Mother Nature is preparing them to go. And for me, it's about loving them. How do we make connection or feel, we can trust someone in any situation? It's about knowing how to actively listen. It's about knowing how to give feedback. It's about recognizing when you're bringing fear to the situation, because 85% of our fears never happen anyway.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
It is. And it's about knowing what's your story. And actually, is it about both of you? Is it serving both of you? Or is it just serving one of you? I think we have an innate knowing as humans when people really want to connect with us. And I think always saying to them, there's always an open door here, no matter what you do. And my mother was brilliant at that. We used to have teenagers from all the other families come around our house. We'd have bodies all over the carpet on a Saturday morning. And she'd ring the other parents and say, I'll send them back in a couple of days. So she was brilliant at it because she never judged. She was always curious and she was always interested. And she also knew that they were all in our house. She knew what we were up to.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that point. I was a single parent. I had two daughters. I still have two daughters, but they were, and it was we were the come-to house. And I had pool table. I had a ping pong table, and I'm Italian, so I have tons and tons of food. And there were kids, and I owned a business where I could come in and out multiple times throughout the day. Right, I didn't have to be there and so I would just pop in, and there was always somebody there, and they're playing ping pong or eating or talking, and it was one of them said one time after my then wife left, they said it's such a sense of calm here that we don't have that at our house. It's because it's not that I didn't care what they did. I did care a lot, but I wanted them to be comfortable because first off, I wanted to know where my children were. That was the first thing. And so I know where my children are. And then you can sort of screen who these friends are, and you can just learn so much just by listening, just being in the kitchen cooking and not talking, and listening and hearing some of the things that they're concerned about, what you call their sense of self.
Mm-hmm. I always say we have two ears and one mouth for a good reason. But of course, we blabble, and often kids don't hear from their parents until they've got something that they don't necessarily feels positive for them. And I'm not saying that wrong. And do you know what? I'm not beating parents. I'm really not, because it's okay not to have it figured out. The whole landscape of parenting is completely different. They're constantly managing, they're constantly fixing, they're constantly having to schedule this, that, and the other. When I was a kid running around in the summer, no one managed my summers. My mother didn't have to worry about that. Fed me in the morning, out the door, wouldn't be back till the evening, because I get fed in someone else's house, around where I lived. But now it's not like that. So parents feel so much more stress. And we know from the science, stressed adults create stressed children, because it's an energy, and we're just balls of energy.
Mm-hmm.
We're programmed to feel it because we know whether we're safe or not. We're even programmed to smell stress. How crazy is that?
Yes, that's incredible. We see a lot of situations. When I was growing up in high school age, just after high school, I used to umpire Little League when little kids play. And there was the parents there and the coaches and yelling, and then one day they asked me, because I had the key to all the equipment, and they said, could we just go on a Saturday and just play? And so I opened up the place for them, and then I left. We didn't tell any of the parents that this was going on. I sort of came by a little bit later, and they were having a blast. They were playing, they were calling their own balls and strikes. They were calling if someone was out. They were laughing, teasing each other a little bit. But I pointed this out to the president of the organization. I said, they were having fun. We don't make it fun. We overschedule our children. They got to be here at this time. They got to race from there to here, and then you got to go to the dance club, and you got to go over here. And the child is on the schedule that you as an adult couldn't even keep up with. And they're fatigued, and they're tired, and they're stressed. And as you point out in the book, that leads to an awful lot of illnesses. Stress leads to a lot of illnesses, correct?
Mm-hmm. Headaches, anxiety, tummy aches, all sorts of stuff. I mean, actually, stress, I think, is the source of so much illness in us, because it has the ability to turn on and turn off our genes. I mean, we can all potentially have cancer in our bodies, but it's the stress that will turn on that gene to be sure that we get it. So we can't expect our children to be able to navigate the world we live in now in a way we never expected any other generation to do it. It's like it's changed so much, it's fallen on top of us. But also, because of the stories we get fed, we have so much more fear, so much more social comparison, so much more, whether we like it or not, keeping up with the Joneses, so much more, well, I need to have this, and I need to have that, and I need to the other. I'm so busy working to get all that stuff outside myself. I feel empty on the inside, because none of that stuff will fill you up for long enough. I mean, we need the basics, but actually, the older I get, the more time I can spend outdoors, just by the ocean or having a walk. I never want to go into a shop. It's the last place I want to go. But if we can learn that, if we can learn that it's actually having a really good friend, it's feeling we belong, it's feeling we're not on our own, it's feeling loved. And I also say too, parents should remember, when our children land into our laps in those early years as babies, hello, we do not get it right so many times. And they forgive us, right?
Yes.
When it comes to the teen years, I say it's payback time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to grow with them. You have to change with them. And you can make it a joyful journey if you choose to. And you know what? Do you want to hang out with someone who's stressed and angry? Or do you hang out with someone who brings you joy? Because I know where I'd be. And actually, they're no different.
This has been amazing. Emer, we're just about out of time. Is there any last thoughts you want to leave with the viewers around the world here?
Okay, I think I've probably mentioned some of them already, but I'm kind of going to just go and reinforce them. It's okay not to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfect. As a parent, if you're struggling, go and talk to someone. Talk to a friend. Because you know what? If you're feeling it, plenty more are too. Don't try and keep up with the Joneses because you never know what's going on behind closed doors. Be responsible for yourself. Be responsible for your unit. Don't force your child to be someone they're not. Find their talents and purpose and try and find joy in the everyday. Find time for yourself. Because when we can get that balance, we can give more. So the time you spend with your kids, it's got to be quality rather than quantity. And I know that from growing up because my mother was a full-time working mother. She'd be away so much, even my older brother would look after me. But I never felt that I wasn't loved.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just be mindful of your internal story, fears, and where you place your attention and focus. Because where your focus goes, your energy flows.
It's another great line. We've had 4 or 5 outstanding lines here from Emer. How do people get a hold of you? Because they're going to want to talk to you or connect with you after this.
Oh, I'd be delighted if they wanted to do that. So I have a website, www.teenreconnect.com / and my name is Emer O'Donnell, which I'm sure you're going to have somewhere on your
It'll be there.
Your publicity around this. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me under Emer O'Donnell, Teen Reconnect on LinkedIn. It's probably the main social media that I do. And if you want to know more about my book, well, it's on Amazon. And you'll certainly learn more about me in there.
Absolutely, you will. Well, as I said, we're just about out of time, my friend. And thank you. I want to thank Emer for showing us the critical role that family plays in empowering our children. And that's the magic word to me, is empowering, allowing them to be themselves, to let them grow, to let them become what they're best suited and fit to be. Now, you can see this podcast on my show, which is called Life Altering Events. It'll be on Parade Deck. It'll be on my YouTube channel, which is also called Frank Sakari, because I keep everything simple because I forget all these logins and passwords. I'll also send links to Emer, and she'll post them everywhere she puts things in her world. If you use the YouTube channel, please subscribe. And let me leave you with this. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Emer showed us where many of those rocks are. Join us again next week. We'll look into another life-altering event. Emer, one more time, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Frank. I love talking to you.
Thank you.